I thought we would get our story straight on what topics we would talk
Oh
about.
yeah, we should. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it's like an emergency pod.
It is an emergency pod.
It's an emergency pod. We stopped doing
Post emergency pod.
Yeah.
It's a really weird juxtaposition, right? Like human phenomenon, bank run, government backing, and then ChatGPT 4 surging ahead.
Right. It's almost like the perfect encapsulation of how our civilization succeeds despite itself, really powered by advances in technology and new things. And so I saw some statistic yesterday that was like creative disruption in a nutshell. Alexa's team has 10,000 people and OpenAI has 350.
Yeah. But think about how many like compliance people there are at Alexa. It's a hardware company it's hardware at the end of the day. They're trying to build all the applications for Alexa in Alexa. They probably have like an ads team. I don't know. Those are like apples to apples comparisons, to be honest.
It's not apples to apples, but it's in the trend of perhaps bloat emerging at a lot of these companies and organizations that don't necessarily need it. I think there was, I don't know if I saw it yesterday or whenever, but Zuckerberg talking about how being a leaner organization enabled faster execution on priorities. It seems obvious.
I mean, like the 80-20 rule is real, right? Which is 80% of the answer or the value. Sometimes 90-10 is in a small segment of, or like one decision. So it's like you just do 80-20 it, and it saves you a lot of distractions. And then I'm sure similarly, it's 80% of the work is being done by 20% of the people.
Right.
So you just get rid of the rest, and there's so many processes get built up and they're really unnecessary.
80-20, let's see, 400 is what percentage of 10,000?
Well, that's a good point. It's definitely less than 20%.
No, it's not for sure, but I think the point is OpenAI has had this breakthrough in natural language interaction, and people have been speaking to their Alexa for however long it's been, and there hasn't been some kind of massive innovation in how Alexa responds. And she often doesn't know what kind of music I want to listen to.
Yeah.
I think people would like to hear your perspective on the whole SVB case study, live case study, and kind of what it means, what its broader implications are.
I guess like the short context here is at Avalanche, all three of our Fund 2 bank accounts are with SVB, a management company, GP entity, limited partner entity. And of our portfolio companies for Fund 1, about like 12% now, as we've learned, have had exposure. We had 2 founders who ended up taking out cashier's checks on Thursday. And then we didn't have any company exposure in Fund 2. That being said, we invest in pre-seed and seed. And so most of our companies are pretty small. And so the 250K FDIC limit, or like their treasury management is a little bit less relevant than some of the like growth stage companies that I've talked to founders at who, or even funds at who had 15 million at SVB because they just, and a lot of that was just timing, right? Because they just done a capital call, or they were in the process of moving cash around or something. And so I think there was just some like weird timing stuff. I think one of the headlines here though is that like the absolute wrong take is that you were stupid to have money with SVB. Like that was SVB was a top 20 bank. It was supposed to be safe. It's the regulator's job to ensure that liquidity standards are in place, and no one had too many concerns about the short-term liquidity until there was a run on the bank. Now, of course, there was the potential like solvency issues with the hold to maturity, interest rate, duration mismatches with the treasuries that the bank had taken out. And now I think we're learning this week that might be a more systemic than people thought on Thursday and Friday, when they thought it was just like an SVB problem. So I don't know how that gets worked out. That is for the Treasury Secretary and the Federal Reserve to sort out with the boards of these banks. But yeah, that's what, like in the macro scheme of things, we can only control what we can control. I would expect a lot more volatility ahead. And one of the best takes I've seen on this is the best way to combat like a potentially broken financial system is to just be cash generative.
Right. Yeah. What's salient for me is, like, on the one hand, there's this whole bank analysis parlor game going on, or banking analysis.
Yeah.
And why this happened, how did it happen, how broad are the underlying conditions for the economy, and is our banking system and economy resilient to all these things? And I'm not an expert on that. A lot of other people who aren't experts are acting as if they're experts, but it's certainly interesting. But even within that whole kind of set of issues, the operative thing is what you said, which is there was a run on the bank. And that makes it, I remember studying the Great Depression and all this talk of emotion and how it drives the economy, and like you see it live. And I remember we were on a call, like just a regular weekly avalanche call, while this was happening on Twitter. And so we were certainly on the inside. We had like hectic and frazzled founders, and some folks were really tied up in it.
Yeah.
And the word of the day for me, that it was reflexivity. It's just thinking about how bad it is leads to an action, which leads to more people thinking about how bad it is. It becomes effectively a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so that's the whole bank analysis set of issues. And then on the other side is what you said, like the good take here is the evergreen good take for entrepreneurship, which is build a good business, fundamentals, have customers, pay attention to your cash, and go out and execute.
I think one of the things I've been also thinking about, which we'll learn more in the weeks to come, is about the potentially manage the dynamics between management and boards and managing risk and how people make decisions, and to the extent that people feel like they can dissent, because I'm interested in the conversations at SVB that led to like this set of actions, them taking out these 10-year
treasuries.
10-year treasuries, and what the board said, and do we have an issue? I think Silicon Valley has an issue of groupthink and people being unwilling to challenge other people because if you challenge someone before a disaster has happened and you end up like saving them, you never get any credit for that, right? Like people still just like think you're difficult and they don't want you on their board.
If you're
a challenger,
persistently thinking about downside and risk.
Yeah, like we don't know that this happened, but if you think that maybe the CEO went in front of the board and was like, here's like the set of data, because you can go back and see that they were reporting this stuff over the last year, and you're like, did the board just not say anything? Did they say things like maybe you should fix it, but then management didn't? Like my own experience from when I was at a big FTSE 100 company was that the board basically thought their job was to hire and fire the CEO. And until they decided to lose confidence in the CEO, like they were going to basically rubber stamp everything they did. Yeah. And maybe they ask a question or two, but it wasn't like anything that couldn't be fobbed off.
Hindsight's 2020. Honestly, on the surface, buying 10-year treasuries doesn't seem like a risky move. I guess when it's like you're setting up a financial engineering house of cards, and if you're off by a couple of degrees, it can turn everything upside down. It's a different story. And I'm sure there were people who worked at SVB whose job it was to look at that.
Yeah, that's the job of the bank, right? Is to manage.
Did these rate rises not set off some red flag alarm? Should they not have?
Yeah. And it's not like the Fed didn't signal they weren't going to raise rates. That was like they said they were going to do that. And then
have you seen this Twitter spat between Balaji and Taleb?
I have. Yeah, I have.
What's your take on that?
So my most recent tweet was, it's perfectly acceptable just to not think too deeply about some things. And it wasn't actually related to that Twitter spat, but I don't know. This stuff is complicated. And I think that one of the issues potentially for Balaji or for all of us is that if you're contrarian and right, and you have a big audience, you get such massive credit for that. And Balaji's been contrarian and right like quite a few times on some things. Yeah. He's probably been contrarian and wrong on some big things too. But remember, I can't recognize those ones. I can only remember the ones where he was like. And so I do think there's this incentive from some of our big talking head personalities to like come out strong on something that they might not be as certain of as they seem.
Honestly, looking at what he's saying, he doesn't seem wrong that there's a lot of underwater banks who did what SVB did. I think some of the tone don't attribute to malice, which can be attributed to incompetence.
Yeah.
And then Taleb is just, he's being himself.
Instigator. Yeah. He's also heavily invested in this hedge fund that wins big when the system collapses. There are some people who have invested upside in system collapse.
Okay, so we spent some time doing what we said we weren't going to do, which is do bank analysis as non-professional bank analyzers.
Yeah.
But we sent out, you put together, I thought, a really useful letter for the Fund 1 and Fund 2 portfolio companies. And maybe you can just talk about what you think, what's important going forward for people who are steering the ship of their companies.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I guess the genesis for this letter was our Monday partner meeting. We had that sigh of relief over the Fed announcement that or the Treasury announcement they were backing all of the depositors. And we're like, okay, if we're going to put ourselves in our founders' shoes, what's our advice to them? And what have we, of all the conversations that we've been a part of over the last 72 hours, what are all the emerging themes that people have been saying? Because that's what founders have been asking us. They're like, oh, what are you hearing? What's kind of consensus? What's coming out? And we then focused on 3 areas. One was managing yourself, managing your energy, managing how you are relating to your team and what you're putting out there, managing your own, like maybe inner emotional volatility during this time. And that part was mostly inspired or written by our coach in residence, Doug, and we offered people free consultation and coaching from time with him, which some founders are now taking him up on, which is great. And then the second, when we started with the individual, and then we went to the company level, and we're like, all right, if you're managing your business, what's the key things here? And sometimes I feel bad writing this paragraph, but I don't think it's funny because it's just worth reminding. And I had a couple of conversations with founders this week that I was like, okay, maybe that wasn't a condescending paragraph, where it's just like, all right, just focus on getting to product market fit, get to find your cash flow break even, focus on your customers, keep your customers happy, and manage your burn. Don't be doing frivolous expenses. Like maybe don't go to that unless your customers are at a conference or you think it's really going to move the needle. Like I would not go to it. Really, the time is now to button up and just back to basics. And I think sometimes people just need to hear it, and sometimes you have to remind yourself that you're like in this time of crisis, like it really very few things, doing the things that matter well is the most important. And then the third area was managing the external environment, which is to say, we think that there are a ton of things that are outside of the control of founders and businesses. I would say, I do not think that the volatility in the financial system is going to turn around overnight. If anything, it will probably get more volatile, and expect that fundraising will be harder, terms and valuations will be more difficult to come by. And then also my last piece of advice was just communicate with your investors, send investor updates, tell people where you're at, because it really just gives investors confidence that you're thinking, that you're on top of it. And we've seen that with our own LPs, and I think anyone managing capital or managing a business, like just you cannot over communicate. You're not going to be spamming anyone. No one's upset. You're on mute, I think.
It is true. I'm not sure if you sent it to me, but it's such a correlation between founders and investors who send regular updates. You know, if you're sending a regular update and things are not going well, that's actually better than not sending any updates. So people have visibility and they can help, and it's not a surprise. But yeah, it's one of those very simple things that not everyone does.
And also take the time to do the investor update, to like step back, structure your thoughts.
Yeah.
Think about what it is you really want to say and what's truly going on. Because I think the reason when I hear founders or investors be like, you're like, oh, where's the update? They're like, oh, I was so busy, I couldn't do it. I was like, you're too busy to think clearly and write it down for like an hour. Yeah. Like that's a bad sign. That means that like you are just like reacting to, and you're maybe overwhelmed and stressed. And so I think that's where you begin to get to the underlying issue, and you get to Douglas's point about the inner work is maybe you need to take a deep breath.
The more time I spend with Douglas, and the more time we have this lens that is explicitly around founder psychology and well-being, and what is their temperament, and what's the best way to support them and coach them and empower them to do the same with their teams. It really is like a cornerstone of successful businesses, founder psychology. And we put it in this note: founder psychology, business fundamentals, and kind of markets and corporate strategy. You don't hear reading the tea leaves on SVB and FRB on that list. And that's a total sideshow. It's really easy to get distracted. We live in the era of infinite distractions. So I think good piece of advice for founders to follow. Yeah. Focus on yourself, focus on your health, focus primarily on your business, but also have good advisors who can help you understand the environment that you're in.
Yeah, what we didn't put in that email, and I thought about it, was I was like, I don't think I need to put here's the list of 10 resources to learn about treasury management and diversification. You can do that. You know? Yeah. That's a commodity.
Speaking of commodities, I was going to transition on the term commodity to AI. I'm not sure if that's an obvious bridge for you or anyone who else is listening, but so much AI. And I think the word that's been thrown around that seems the right frame for the next couple of years is consumer surplus. This stuff is just going to be out there in the water, out in the open. I think it's the cost curve and the kind of the trend towards commoditization, meaning it's just everywhere for basically free, is happening way faster than I think anyone expected.
I would just slightly caveat everywhere, because we've all been to the health. I think what'll happen is this divergence that we've already seen happen, right? Is that you go to the hospital or to the healthcare system and you're like, wow, their scheduling system is still using Sheila on her cell phone to try and with
right
or write out when you're supposed to get an X-ray, and at the DMV, it's still like, why can't they just pull up all my info and have my biometrics? So I think what it's going to do is, for the areas that were already surging ahead, they're just surging faster, and then these legacy systems that haven't even done that well with cloud and mobile infrastructure are kind of, it's just going to be more painful.
Yeah. So consumer surplus, I think, is probably an instructive phrase. It's not an enterprise or government surplus quite yet. Maybe it will be, because those industries, health, housing, education, those are the heavily regulated industries. And people are all in a tizzy about what AI is going to do in education. I don't see it changing at the rate that it changes in consumer environments. Like, for example, Duolingo just came out with its AI-powered Duolingo experience. That's the best in class consumer education there is out there. And we're seeing all sorts of products in the kind of B2B or K-12 or higher ed space that are integrating AI, but they're going to only be able to integrate AI in a way that makes sense for the existing customer base. And those customers are colleges, institutions, same thing for hospitals, same thing for housing.
Yeah.
Have you played with GPT-4?
Not as much as you have.
That's for sure.
I don't even know. So the honest answer is no. I don't know if I have access to it. I don't know why. I guess I've just been like
busy.
Yeah, busy and tired. And I guess I'm also, and maybe this is bad, but I'm like, I feel like I'm 37, right? And I feel like I'm like the cusp of old, and I'm like, I just need to double down on, like, these things are coming, and eventually I will, like, when the tools are here, I will integrate them in to what I'm doing. But until then, I want to continue to sharpen the saw on my own thinking and writing and judgment. And the best way to do that is by doing the hard work. Like, I didn't have ChatGPT-3 write the letter to founders, and I don't think they could have written the letter that we wrote. You know, it wouldn't have come up with those three. Like, might have hit like all the same sort of ideas, but it would have sounded really generic. I don't think it would have had the emotional resonance. People know it doesn't come from you. And I just think that stuff matters, and I think it'll always matter. And if it doesn't, then like people are going to be really depressed. Like, I read this article this morning, or I probably just like skimmed it, from Tyler Cohen, that was like, middle-class kids, their best friend is going to be an AI growing up. And I was like, wow, like child mental health wasn't already skyrocketing to like depression. I can't imagine what having your friend being like a AI bot would be like. The answer isn't let's take away all human pain and make everything easy. Be like, yeah, I'm sure it would be a lot easier to have your best friend be an AI that like always supported you, was never negative, that you didn't have to worry about their an uncertain reaction that you might have from them because they're like automatically enlightened. Like, that's not what humanity is about. It's about going through the shared experience from like childhood to adulthood and self-discovery, and the things that are painful are some of the most meaningful things.
It's a good manifesto for humanism in an AI world, and at the same time, it's just the toothpaste is out of the tube. And I had a conversation with a founder last week. We discussed it. He's a former team member at Replica. And so in advance for that call, I downloaded Replica. And I'll just say it was one of my first yeesh moments.
Oh, yeah.
And then I did some research on Replica and spoke with this fellow, and they're not embarrassed by the fact that their target market is the kind of sad, lonely, depressed young people who are used to interacting online. And it is a sad commentary on the state of our society, civilization, but it's not going anywhere.
Is it not going anywhere though? I probably text, I'm in a ton of WhatsApp groups and one-to-one text message conversations with people, but let's say there's probably 10 or 15 that are meaningful to me on a daily basis. And not a single one of them is like an AI bot that I interact with. Like each one of them are humans that I care about and care about their opinions with, get not just like intellectual, like professional value from it, but like personal value as well. And man, I just have to believe that going down the rabbit hole of people believing, oh, I have 4 AIs that I'm talking to about helping me think through this deal. Okay. That sounds really sad. Sounds really.
It's interesting because on the example you just gave of talking to AIs to think through a specific purpose or problem, I can see that being a use case for technology. That's the story of technology going back to the beginning, enhancing our capability, solving problems that are in front of us. On the other hand, if the problem is connection and a human connection, that's not really a problem for technology. But who are we to say? There's an interesting dynamic where basically everybody is becoming a bit of a philosopher in this era of AI, where we're asking these fundamental questions about, is this okay? Is this right? What are we supposed to be doing? So yeah, when I see things like Replica and some of the other things in this digital human space, I have questions. I think one of my kind of observations is that technology is not going to stop. It's just going to continue. We should be really watching carefully for these trends. The best way to predict the future is to know the past, or predict history is to know the future, something like that.
I thought it was like the best way to predict the future was to build it.
That's one of the lines, but there's another line that is the best way to know the future is to understand the past.
Yeah, that's true.
I think that's from Charles Mann. I heard that on a podcast with him. And it certainly seems like this whole digital human thing is going to continue. And the other thing about this is, speaking about reflexivity, we talked about reflexivity on like this 12-hour or 6-hour time cycle with SVB. It's also happening on decade-long time cycles with Hollywood sci-fi. And we're still in this paradigm of Skynet and Her. And what was the other one? Was it called Replica?
There was it Ex Machina?
Ex Machina, that's right.
And Westworld. Yeah, there've been quite a few. Even Minority Report, right? Those were basically AIs. They were trying to predict crime before it happened.
And yeah. Well, I saw an interesting bit on the some consultant on Minority Report who is a futurist, really smart guy. He said some really fascinating tidbits, and you can tell that he did his homework. That movie came out 20 years ago, and it's like, if you would have to bet, are we going towards a more Minority Report world or less? It seems like we're on that Minority Report track.
Yeah, for sure. That being said, look at the crime in our cities, though, right? It's not like crime has gone down.
Right.
It's not like white collar crime has gone down.
Right. That being said, AI is getting stronger and stronger. People's lives are getting more digital and more digital. And you can envision a super AI that's going to know if you have an intention to do a crime before you do it.
Yeah, you think with everyone having a smartphone, that would just be a matter of time.
Right.
That's always the question with OpenAI and Google. Is like Google is always the like don't be evil company, right? Because of anyone, you'd think that they would have access to the most data and information. Or Apple.
Yeah.
They know everything going through my phone, and Google knows everything going through all my emails.
It's going to be out there, and I think I'm not an expert or in a position to really talk about it, but one of the kind of themes I'm seeing emerging this week is this battle between open and closed AI. And it's interesting because open AI is kind of on the closed AI side of things, and then the open source crowd and Stable Diffusion are on this is going to be open source. Let's put an LLM on everybody's phone. And that tension's been with us certainly since the start of the software era, and probably even before that.
Yeah. But do you use OpenAI? You don't use any of the open source platforms, or do you?
I use them all. I'm an equal opportunity offender. But certainly have used OpenAI, and I've used Stable Diffusion.
Do you see a difference between them?
GPT-4 is next level. I think I'll just say briefly, I am like you, I'm in my mid-30s. I never learned how to code, like actually like setting up an instance and getting something out in the wild. And I don't know if you've seen these demos, but like you can basically get working code and architecture and troubleshoot it and debug it very quickly, like in a matter of hours. And I'm not necessarily learning it the way that I would, where I understand the fundamentals and the concepts and the architecture, but I'm like speed running it, and I'm actually now hiring a tutor to help me understand what I've done.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Do you think that raises the bar for companies we invest in to have a CTO, or it makes it less relevant?
Honestly, the way that I'm saying it is I'm quickly becoming a 1X developer. And I think once I get to being a 1X developer, the path between me and a 10X developer is not that long. And so I think it really democratizes the ability to be technical.
So do you think if you were starting theoretically a new company, would you be like, I really need a technical co-founder, or would you be like, I think I can handle it myself until I get someone who I can delegate this task to, just like I delegate maybe a curriculum development or whatever it is, product management, any other task?
Expertise is still extremely valuable. That being said, like GPT-4 is an expert.
Right.
But I guess this gets to the fundamental question of what's the difference between what GPT is doing versus how a human mind works. But I think at the end of the day, I want a technical co-founder or co-pilot that can help me understand the concepts of what's going on, think strategically about the future, and just be able to set context with somebody, which increasingly you can do with GPT-4. So I don't know like when this will shift, when I'll be able to do all the things I'm talking about with an actual computer program. But I still think what it means to be a CTO is going to be basically an API to all of these different things, understanding how they work together, understanding the mechanics of how to link them up. It's funny because like the best programmers were the best Googlers and the best readers of Stack Overflow.
Yeah.
And so GPT just makes those people just that much more powerful.
Yeah. That makes sense. I find it really difficult to switch between writing and and marketing and creative thinking and technical aspects. When the pandemic started, I did about an hour to 90 minutes a day on Code Academy and web development, and got 75% of the way through their curriculum, which included so much stuff. Like I did some Python, some SQL, some JavaScript, Git, GitHub. And I learned a lot. But I think I would find it really hard to do the job that I'm doing today and play around with it in a really meaningful way. Yeah, I don't know. I've been on this Twitter kick recently. Like I put up all these tweets, and one of the founders was saying that I've been really good on Twitter, and that he was like impressed with my newsletter. And he's like, he's like, you're a real pro, you're such a natural. And I was like, my newsletter I'm on 190 weeks of newsletter writing, you know. I'm now devoting more time than I thought I wanted to putting myself out there on Twitter and LinkedIn and engaging on social media, because I feel like it's what we have to do to be successful. But I don't know, it's such a weird juxtaposition.
That it is. What a time to be alive.
Yeah.
Anything else before we break? We haven't talked about crypto.
Oh yeah.
Not sure if we need to.
One of the things you didn't mention in the SVB conversation was that I think it's gone under the radar, maybe purposely, is the Signature Bank closure, which I think is quite a big deal for the crypto ecosystem in the US, right? Because that was the bank, and now people are going to have a harder time moving in and out of exchanges, particularly if they're not technical, right?
What's the relationship between Signature and Coinbase?
I'm not entirely sure. Because Coinbase, even on Coinbase, so you have to remember, you're not actually buying the underlying like coins from them. Like when you buy one Bitcoin on Coinbase, they're just holding it for you.
Right. They're custodying the for you.
And the fees are pretty high.
Yeah.
So I haven't been following the details of it as much as I should. I think, but my general view is what we wrote in August, which is Web3 crypto isn't going away. Like digital money is the future. And I think there's a lot of people still building during this crypto bear market or winter or whatever. And in a year or so, it's going to reemerge, and people get serious and stay the course while building real tech and real valuable applications will probably be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to march on, and the vocabulary will change. No Web3, probably no crypto, probably no NFT, but it will be running on certain things. Will be running on decentralized ledgers, digital cash, digital collectibles. And I saw a tweet from Rune. You know him?
No.
He's the guy who came up with the word cell versus shape rotators. He's an AI researcher. And he had this tweet where he said he was pushing back at people saying, oh, this is a grift. He was talking about AI, and he said, people don't understand that grift and revolution are conjoined at the hip. It takes decades of smart juicers and internet money to produce one open AI. This is the law of equivalent exchange. And basically what he's saying is like the hype cycle is part of what enables really exciting and new technologies to come into the world. And yeah, we're in the hype financial cycle of AI right now. We were in the hype financial cycle of crypto previously. Just because there were hype and there were quote unquote grifters in crypto does not mean that the whole thing is a grift and the whole thing was a bunch of hype. So he's talking about AI, but I thought it applied to crypto, although probably not at the same scale. Although when I think about it, if you read a future history of the internet, you're probably not going to use crypto or AI in, maybe you would if you were doing a detailed history, but those things are going to be baked in to the fabric of what we think of as the internet.
For sure. That was even the whole idea of quote Web3, right? Was that it's just the next version of the internet.
Yeah, but there was a lot of Web3 is better than Web2. But yeah.
Yeah, so many things.
So many things.
What else do we want to say?
No, I think we've done the emergency pod. Is there anything else on your mind?
No, I guess we could close off with to say Eric and I are going to be at ASU GSV in San Diego from April. Man, I can't remember the dates.
I think it's 16th through the 19th, something like that.
Yeah, and we're going to be just hanging out. Not just
Caitlin is on a panel about alternative education, and I will be hanging out at one of those outdoor tables.
And I'm going to hang out too. And that's our approach to the conference, is to be around and accessible and not overschedule every little thing. And I'm looking forward to seeing people and catching up in person. It's been a long time.
Likewise. Can't do that with an AI.
No, yeah. Cool.
All right.
Awesome.
See you there. Bye.
Bye.